Excellent. Take it away, Mr. Chairman.
All righty then.
Mr. Chairman.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. I had to connect it to my phone and I realized my video was off too. So none of you saw me when I was giving you the 1 minute finger. All right. Thank you all for joining on this lovely holiday. And I apologize for it being a little late too in the day, but we can hopefully breeze through some of this stuff. I know obviously there will be conversation on a couple items here in particular that might take some time, but we can be mindful of ending at around 6. That's kind of my goal. Getting into this, the first agenda item, which brings us from the last one, I had proposed, and I think all chairs of committees should be looking to adopt a very short description of what the purpose of each committee is, not only for themselves, but also for the public. Some of them have been identified, some of them haven't. So in this meeting, I'd like to go on this one that's on the agenda. I'm also going to be offering on the council level soon a new policy process on how committees make recommendations to the council. I think that's a really important process that needs to be defined as well. Basically, any proposals is what I'm going to suggest that are referred to the council from a committee should include all the meeting dates that they met, include what the consensus was of the committee. So if it wasn't unanimous, for example, it would have to explain what the positions were, and providing some substance to it as well of why basically these recommendations are being made. I think that's important not only for the council to have that information and see the process in front of them, but also for the public who may not attend a lot of the council meetings or committee meetings, to see the whole thought process, how many times they met, why the recommendations were or were not unanimous, basically. So that's something down the road. So here under the adoption of the mission statement, it's really the first sentence that describes the committee itself, which is the purpose of the Sustainability Committee is to identify the long-term viability of departmental, economic, environmental, social, and other issues pertaining to the town of Millinocket. That's basically it, long-term viability. The rest of the language is something that I think every committee should also adopt into theirs, which basically defines what their limits are and their purposes, which are to make recommendations to the town council for discussion and approval of any policies, procedures, or actions that may result from committee discussions. Any or all committee meetings are public meetings that must appropriately notify the public of meeting dates, times, and location. No official action can be taken on behalf of the town of Millinocket unless approved by a vote at a town council meeting. So that's the language that I'd also like to see in the policy, that I wanted to include here. Are there any thoughts on the adoption of this committee's mission statement? Councilor Danforth?
Yeah, I just, there's one sentence in there I think probably should be clarified. All committee meetings are public meetings. That's great. That must appropriately notify the public. What does appropriately mean? Is that a week out? Is that 2 days before the meeting? I think that needs to be defined so it's consistent across all the committees. And is it just that it's going to be posted on the town website, if that sort of thing? So you're on mute.
Yeah, I just realized that. Thank you. All right, you can hear me now. I agree, Jane. Louis?
I'm thinking statute dictates what that is, what a public notice is. We've not met that bar yet, but going down the road, that should be a goal.
Thank you, Louis. Agreed. I'm probably going to have that second half. I'm just going to use the first sentence for the committee's mission statement. So perhaps I'll take out the rest and put that towards the policy change that I'll be recommending on the council level. Any thoughts though on that first sentence? Everyone good with that?
Mhm.
All right. With that, we'll move to airport updates. Water's not working there, so that's an update. Jeff, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, it's been a frustrating few days. Today I was exploring options with ground heaters. I've exhausted most of the options here for trying to thaw the pipe directly. It's not allowed to use welders anymore, obviously. And probably what's going to have to happen, but I'm going to meet with the manager tomorrow again, speak to him about this, but we may have to dig the line up and replace it. Do a different job. I've tried and Ralph's tried. We've talked about it, off and on all day. So we're gonna have to do something with this because I have no bathrooms, no water, no nothing. If somebody lands here and needs a bathroom, I don't have one. And porta potties, we tried to order a porta potty today and I can't have one until a week from tomorrow. So,
Mr. Chairman,
Please.
Matt Bragdon here. Jeff, will Thursday's warm weather be any indication to help or no?
no, it'll make it worse. The
Oh,
more,
lovely.
the more warm days we have, the further it drives the frost in the ground. So that's what caused the problem last time. We had a warm day last week and it froze the pipes.
Yes, Mike.
Yeah, Jeff, is this something that's happened in the past, or is this a new occurrence that just came this year?
I've been here 21 years. It's never happened. It's never
Why do
Well,
you-
it's unfortunate that, oh, sorry, go ahead, Mike.
I was gonna say, why do you suppose now? I mean, we've had much colder winters, we've had much different changes in weather. Why now?
I was told that it happened once in the 90s. And I don't know what the circumstances were behind that, but it happened once in the 90s before Tony and I were here and before I was here. And that they had to use a welder and thaw it out. But the difference this year is the amount of frost we have. They had a main break on Forest Avenue and they said the frost was 5.5 feet in the ground. And this is the first winter that I've plowed snow here that I can go anywhere I want with a piece of equipment without landscaping. Every year, including last year, if you slip off the tar with a piece of equipment, the pavement, you're going to dig up gravel and you're going to dig up lawn and you're going to dig up loam. This year, everything has been hard as a rock since the 1st of December. So I'm guessing that we've got 5 feet of frost in the ground. The pipe was at 6 feet and we got a warm day. It drove the frost down another half a foot or a foot, and now I'm locked down. The problem I'm having, the biggest problem I'm having is finding support to fix it. I've contacted 4 places and they all said, too bad. And one of the biggest reasons is they can't use one of those steamers because I have galvanized fittings. And the fact that the pipes are threaded inside the elbow. So when the steamer comes down and through the elbow, it butts up against the end of the pipe rather than slipping inside the pipe. So they break their machines trying to thaw it that way. If we had copper pipe. So what I would recommend, if we end up digging this up, and Peter, we'll talk more about this tomorrow, is we replace that old galvanized pipe with copper pipe. So if this happens again, we can fix it by normal means. And you put styrofoam over the top and the frost comes down and goes both sides of the styrofoam and you don't have this issue. So may never happen again, but it may happen again next year. I don't know.
All the more reason to put a new building there, right?
Exactly, but I can't wait till 4th of July for the water to thaw out naturally.
Right. Yes, well, I
Well, I
look forward to
trust
hearing
that,
from you tomorrow on that.
Okay,
for an
thank you.
update, and we'll make a plan.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I trust that you'll both have a plan.
Unfortunately, whoops, sorry.
You're good. Go ahead.
Unfortunately, the town doesn't have the equipment to dig the ground. We're gonna have to hire it. It's gonna take an excavator.
Well, I trust that you'll both figure that out tomorrow and have something for the council to look at. It's unfortunate, Jeff, and I wish we had a shorter term solution for you instead of having to drive home every time you got to use the bathroom too. That's not a good place to be,
No. No.
especially if you got coffee going there. Well, you can't have coffee going in there in the morning. Never mind. That's
Been
probably not a
bringing
good
water
choice.
from home for that, but I kick them out early because I don't have a bathroom. The, yeah, my health officer will be on my case, huh, Tom? Yeah, yeah, like, don't look.
Are there any other updates though, Jeff? I know that we talked about in previous meetings, potential logging on airport property and all that.
Yep, logging is going on airport property right now. And as soon as they get further into their project, I'm supposed to meet with Lee Russell and talk stumpage costs and our prices for stumpage and so forth, for what they'll pay for the wood that's on our land. And so that we can move forward with hangars and so forth. I also
Thank you.
did a little update for you on the approach zone for Peddler's Hill. Can you guys all see that?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the.
Slightly.
No,
No, oh, sorry. I'll email it to you guys. But this is the
I
end of
appreciate it. Thank you.
no problem. This is the end of the runway at towards the airport cabins, and this is headed out towards Peddler Hill, and Peddler's Hill is where the X is. Okay, at that point, because that hill is 50 feet higher than the end of the runway, that cuts into the allowable elevation by 50 feet. So in rough figuring this out, we have 70 feet available on Peddler's Hill. It doesn't leave you much room for a 2-story building and a hose tower and an antenna on top for communications. So that would be your limiting factor, would be 70 feet.
Thank you, Jeff. I know that that's something that was brought up before in terms of where to place the new fire department building.
Yep.
This is being recorded, so hopefully those who see this afterwards will understand kind of what we spoke to previously.
Yeah.
About the
Okay.
limitations of that property, not including obviously the issues of traffic and, you know, poor visibility going
Well,
up and down that hill and all that.
This is just my portion of it, you know, as far as the approach zones and everything. There's so many reasons that it doesn't make sense, but I will scan this tomorrow and email you guys a copy of this. But I thought of it last minute tonight with everything else I've had going on, so.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah,
And also, go ahead, Tom.
Jeff, is that where on Peddler's Hill at? Is that right in the center of it?
Yeah, I just pulled in the parking lot with an altimeter. Yeah. I
Yeah.
pulled right in there with an altimeter, so
Okay, thank you.
where I could drive, you know what I mean?
I knew that was a concern. We had talked about that a lot before, but I wasn't sure exactly what it was. I'm glad you did that, so we know. Thank you.
Yeah, it's over field elevation at the airport, which is what's required here is 408 feet, and that's 458 feet. 50
Yeah.
feet.
And my antenna alone is 150 feet.
You're what?
My antenna alone off the top of the building is 150 feet.
There you go.
So, okay, thank you.
And on that issue earlier of pipes freezing, the sustainability committee did kind of absorb the infrastructure committee, given that obviously they complement one another. Are there any other issues, Mr. Manager, that you're aware of in town, or Tom, of pipes freezing or anything that we might want to keep our eyes on as a committee?
Not in terms of town property that I'm aware of. I know that there are sections of the town that tend to freeze up, mostly, you know, in the mobile home parks, just given the structure of the building that they are, the design of those buildings. But in terms of town property, I am not aware of any other issues there.
Thank you.
No, and
Any other
and the
thoughts?
only,
Go ahead, Tom.
yeah, the only thing, as Jeff had mentioned, I've got some concerns with the water company. I met with them again the other day about the one on Forest Avenue, because that was a major break. And I'm beginning to worry about some of the hydrant lines, because a lot of those are old too. And if we've got frost that deep, so we'll just keep our fingers crossed. Nothing that we know of right now is okay right now, but I know that they had talked about checking some of the hydrants every once in a while just to make sure.
That would be a bad deal to hook up and not have water.
Yeah.
Peter, go ahead.
Tom, this and Jeff, I guess this this break that you're referring to, that happened underground.
It was a
And when-
water main break on Forest Avenue, right across from my old house.
Yeah,
And it sheared the pipe right off at the intersection. And when they dug down, there was 5.5 feet of frost. And usually when you get a shear break like that, it is frost, according to the water company. The ground moves and it cuts it off. It doesn't have to move very far.
sure.
Yeah, and as Jeff said, it was right after that warm day. I mean,
Yep.
we had Forest Avenue was flooded all the way down Forest Avenue. The church parking lot was underwater down the street there. A lot of driveways got it. You know, Ralph did an amazing job. They went over and sanded pieces driveways and cleaned it all. You know, helped the water company get it all cleaned up. But those are just things we need to be watching for right now. Just
Sure.
and it's because of the cold weather, but it's because of the warm that we get in between. You know, that I would do for another one this week. They're saying Friday it could get to 50 in the 50s again.
Right.
You know, and then snap right back to cold on Saturday. So it's just something we got to keep an eye on, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that information. That's good for all of us to be aware of. Hopefully this warm weather won't make it worse. Any other thoughts on airport updates? All right. With that, we'll move to discussion on recycling. I know that was an issue that a few members of the public had asked about. Ralph had provided the council with a bunch of numbers basically showing how much recyclables we would need to break even, which is around the 350 ton mark, and we're not anywhere near that. All these documents are posted on our website now under this committee's page. So I let those people in the public know that. I dug it up from the previous council meetings that we had discussed this. But basically it's not cost effective whatsoever for us to be recycling. Although obviously I know there are many of us who would like to see recycling happen. The costs are so great that it makes no sense. So those documents can be viewable, as I said, on the committee page. I just wanted to make that clear on this agenda and offer an opportunity for anyone from the public, if there are any, who has any questions on that. All right. Anyone else, though, have anything to say about that? Okay.
I do know
Moving
that,
along to,
I do
go
know,
ahead.
I do know that Ralph is planning to attend a meeting this week on the facility in Hamden for an update there to see if that process is, get an update on that facility and their process, whether or not they'll be able to open. So we may have some more updates coming from that. I'll share that with the group once we have it.
Thank you, Peter. That would be good to have. There was also, I forgot to mention, a change in the state legislation on how recyclables or non-recyclables would be processed through towns. I believe that was added as well. Essentially, companies are going to start being responsible for basically throwing out the trash of their products. So if they have any packaging or any materials that are a result of purchasing their product, they will have to pay the state for those products, for that waste, and it will be distributed amongst the municipalities. The process of that, I'm not entirely sure in terms of how and when it gets dispersed to municipalities. I'm assuming it's going to be a similar process to revenue sharing, but it could be different. More will come on that though, and I'm sure Ralph would come to a council meeting and speak to that as well at some point. Mike, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I just want to touch base, and I think I've mentioned it in the past. Our contract with the facility in Hamden, I assume that our tipping fees that we're paying right now are those under that contract and not anything that has to do with PERC, even though a lot of our waste is now going down to PERC.
I would have to research that. I can find that out and get an answer.
Are we still taking any, or are we transporting any waste from other communities too for them and getting paid for it?
I'm fairly certain there's an arrangement for transportation that may not be a regular occurrence. It may be situational. Again, I can come up with a more solid answer for both of those items.
If you could, that would be great.
Happy to.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Peter. Any other thoughts on recycling? Yes, Jeff.
Just that if, having worked for Ralph for a dozen years, if Ralph has got his numbers in line, then I would trust him. I would believe what he's saying. He takes it pretty seriously.
Thank you, Jeff. Agreed. And on that note, we'll move over to the discussion of the fire station building. I wanted to give just some updates from the Elks property conversation and hopefully, further discuss the possibilities of where exactly the fire station will be built. I did hear from the developers that are interested in, not only interested in, but contracted with the town in developing airport land for a solar farm, that the rules for the FAA have recently changed that would allow them to more easily develop on airport property. One of the reasons I personally was interested in the Elks property was, as I've mentioned before, the long-term revenue that could come from a solar farm being there, and also economic development opportunities being on Central Street and the fire station. But also the fact that the solar company had concluded before the change in the FAA that it would be one of the only viable sites. So that's why we were looking as a committee to purchase the Elks land and basically have that paid off through the revenue from solar and other future developments. That being said, we've had a few members of the public comment on their concerns about response time if we had a fire station on the Elks property. So Tom, I do want you to kind of speak to that. What your thoughts are on response time on the Elks property versus current location or any other location that we might bring up tonight.
When you're talking response time from there, it can't, if you're talking out towards Kelly's Trail Park, of course it's going to be longer. If you're talking new development and this side of town, it's really not going to make a lot of difference. 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, if you were having this conversation, anywhere but where we are is where you'd want to put the fire station because of the traffic. When Lavashers was booming, when the town was booming and there was a lot of traffic, I will tell you right now, if you have anything bigger than what we have for trucks right now, you have all you can do to get them into the building. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know if we had the ladder truck that we used to have, that took an experienced person to get that truck back into that building. It was very, very tight. In fact, we've had the building, the ladder truck had hit the building at least 3 times that I know of. Putting it out on on the end of Central Street is what everybody keeps saying to me, that, it's too far out. Well, it's really not. If you look at the run that you're going to have, it's going to be a straight run coming into town. You're going to have one traffic light that you're going to have to go through to come down to proceed down over the hill, and you would have automatic lights on that to switch it like they do in Bangor, I would suspect. The Peddler's Hill, we talked about Peddler's Hill and the reasons that it didn't fit good there. Putting the fire station downtown, it just isn't any viable space to put it. That's going to be very well accessed. When Dick and I were looking at that, we actually took the plans that are in Peter's office, because we're still looking at those plans, and tried fitting it on different lots, like the K&M lot, the lot over on Katahdin Avenue where the storage buildings are, the Emery Lee's lot out on Central Street. And, it will fit on any of those lots. The problem is, if you're going to build this, I think we want to be looking down the road. When we build a fire station, let's build a fire station that's going to last us like this. Our building was built in 1936. We want to make sure that we have something that's big enough, and also that we have land around it. That makes a big difference if you have land out around your building to be able to do different things. Maybe someday down the road, the state just issued a bunch of work related projects where they're actually building training centers in some communities across the state. That's getting to be a bigger thing. You can also have it so that you can do a lot of your trainings in your yard. So overall, we need a place that's big enough so that we can move forward with it down the road. Response time in Millinocket, our response time isn't that bad no matter where you come out of. So the response time isn't a big thing with me. One thing that you do want to look at, and this has been the worst year, I've been at the fire station a long time, and I'm down to one building. We did away with the Spruce Street building. All that equipment is strewed all over town. I've got stuff everywhere. I've got stuff at wastewater. I've got stuff in the pool buildings. I've got a brand new snow sled and trailer setting out in the snowbank that we had to rescue 3 weeks ago, and had to chop ice to get it out. That's why it's setting out front now. You'll notice it's setting out by the front of the station by the fire hydrant where I usually park, because and we need to be looking at getting that stuff inside. We shouldn't have to chase to get equipment. If you have any questions, I guess I'll try to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I saw Louis' hand up.
Yeah, looking at a lot, still, I think the fire station would still have the issue of trying to incorporate access to the airport. Given we're got land there, is there, like on Medway Road, is there enough land that to accommodate somewhere down by the transfer station or before it?
Well, we had looked into that. I remember one of the issues was that the wastewater doesn't go down Medway Road, and it would be difficult to put it in there. It's quite
System might
expensive.
work.
Not for the volume of water that fire stations go through. It's quite a bit. Even just washing the trucks alone in winter is quite a volume that septic would not be able to handle.
Can I say something as well?
Please.
Medway Road would be great now, but Tom had stated, straightaway on Central Street. wouldn't the response time be longer on Medway Road than it would be on Central Street?
You want to remember, if you get out, and Medway Road is, there's probably room out there, but you want to remember, if you put it in a residential area, we've got to go down residential streets. And when we talked about putting it out, by the airport. Number one of our big things was the water and the sewer, of course. But one of our other big concerns were, you've got that whole length of Medway Road to go that's very congested as it is. And you're going right through the middle of a residential area. Now, I know when we go to fires, we're going to go down residential streets, but when you're talking about getting a response out of a place to get somewhere, the main route is really where you want to be.
Thank you, Tom. And Jeff, did you have a follow-up to that?
Yeah, the worst intersection we have in town to access anywhere out of is Medway Road and Central Street. So as far as getting a truck off this road onto the main thoroughfare is an issue too. And as mentioned before, the infrastructure out here, the water, the sewer and everything. I'm on a septic, but I have water, but this is where the water ends. So everybody else
Thank you,
is on
Jeff.
well.
Mike, you had a hand up?
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and, it's not that I disagree with Tom on one piece of property, and that's the property of the K&M building. You have an ample lot size. You may have to reconfigure the design of the engineering of the building to accommodate, but you have access to get off on Central Street. You have access to get off on Penobscot Avenue. You have a centrally located building, again, that is easily attainable by walking, biking, driving for citizens within the town of Millinocket. You also would have a building that would be easily noticed and seen and being able to be found by tourists who come to the town, people go to the mountain or whatever. You also would have a new construction in the downtown area, which would be a big boom for the town of Millinocket and a great shot in the arm.
Did he freeze?
I think so.
I think so.
Yep.
As far as downtown revitalization is concerned, a little bit for emergency on Central Street is a dangerous intersection, and that being the one at Sycamore and Central near McDonald's. That's a dangerous intersection to go through. I don't care what you do on just for regular traffic at times. We just lost the power the other day. That was a blinking light, and people were zooming up and down through there on straightaway on Central Street. I just think that in the downtown area has all the advantages and none of the disadvantages of Peddler's Hill, Medway Road, or being on the outskirts of town. As far as a training facility is concerned, we've gone 85 years without having a training facility available. What we need is a public safety building. And that space where K&M offers enough space to build a fire station and possibly having more if we ever decide to relocate or reestablish our police department in that downtown area. That's the other thing you got to think about. I don't want to see eventually have to resort to building a separate building for a police department. With our police department, the only facility we have is in a basement, and that's always been a sore spot with me. So, I mean, this fire station lasted 85 years. It's antiquated, it's outdated, it needs to be replaced. But I don't think sticking it at the edge of town is the right thing for both the community and the town moving forward. You're talking about thinking ahead for the next 50, 60, 70 years. You could better do it in that K&M lot than you could out on the end of Central Street. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. I do have a quick response. I see your hand up, Jeff, but I also see Sandra Sullivan wrote here. I just want to make sure her chat is read. She wrote, "It is dangerous for me to drive my VW Bug down near Levasters. Imagine driving a fire truck down there. It seems to me it would take less time to get a fire truck down Central Street Hill than from the current fire station to Central Street because less congestion." I also wanted to add, oh, I see your hand up too, Peter. Sorry about that. I'll get to you in a second. I just wanted to add, I agree with the idea of a public safety building, fire station building being more accessible to the public in general. Being a walkable distance, from where a lot of people live, that is a concern of mine. At the K&M Auto site, having just driven an ambulance only a handful of times myself already, if there were one logging truck and one other car at that intersection, I would be very concerned about driving through that with an emergency. Imagine having a fire truck. Imagine trying to pull a fire truck out. If there are two logging trucks there, you wouldn't be able to get it out. That is a very tight area as it is, just with vehicles. Trying to fit emergency vehicles through that would really concern me. I just wanted to point that out just from my own experience. Peter and then Jeff.
I just wanted to jump in and mention the parcel of land adjacent to the Public Works building owned by our Katahdin. We had a discussion this morning and they brought up that parcel of land again. And I know that was brought up in conversation within the past year of this committee in regard to possible location of public safety building. What they are looking for ultimately is a yes or no, a pass or buy option on that. They believe they may have other interested parties in it. So something to consider now, whether or not it's considered for public safety or not, but they wanted the sustainability committee or the town to revisit the potential use of that parcel and get an answer to them one way or another with interest.
Do you know what the dimensions of that property is?
Not much.
Approximately a half an acre. And it is off the beaten track as far as anybody not familiar with the area being able to get assistance from a public safety building in that space and finding it.
Right,
Is
and I'm
that,
not speaking in advocacy of using that.
No, I know.
I'm just saying, that was addressed by them and in the, for the sake of partnership, we should certainly get back to them with a yes or no.
is that the piece of land where Bragdon's buses are? Is that where you're talking, Peter?
Just past that.
That little, well, there was supposed to be a road in there is what was actually going to
Right.
be there. Because I owned that first trailer right there. And there was supposed to be a road right next to that.
Mhm.
I think where the buses are belongs to the town now, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's that, and then it must be your old trailer lot as well, your old mobile home lot, because I think what they mentioned was it was this parcel of land plus the next lot, which previously had a mobile home on it or an undeveloped mobile home lot.
I agree with Mike on that, just being off the path. Jeff, you had your hand up?
I just want to, being here as a representative of the airport, I don't want to lose sight of everything we're working on for commercial service in here and fire department access to the airport. If we don't build on the site down the end and have a road coming to the airport, then if we're gonna continue on with commercial service, then we're gonna have to put something for a fire apparatus over here.
Yeah, Jeff, I'm appreciative that you brought that up because that was something that I had thought of myself. There would be the possibility of having a satellite station, basically, where a garage or something could fit maybe old equipment or equipment that would be specific for aircraft when that time comes. Building the infrastructure out for that so that at least that component of it could be completed. Yes, Jeff.
I guess if that ends up being the case, then we could look for surplus crash trucks. They make decent crash trucks for doing that. But to me, cost effective wise, doing it the way we had originally planned seemed to make an awful lot of sense to me.
Tom?
And the other thing you want to think about, if you're even looking to get down that road, I've talked to a couple of departments that do that, such as Prescott does.
That's all.
I've talked to the chief there a couple of times. In fact, I talked to him the other day again about it. And you got to have staffing. You got to have a lot more staffing than what we've got, because you've got to go up there every day and start those units and check those units. And then, we used to cover the airport back in Spruce, when we were Spruce Budworm spraying. And we had to have a dedicated crew. We had to have 4 people come in and take a truck and an ambulance, and we sat at the airport all day. Well, until they were done, we had to be there when those planes started coming in and when those planes left and when they came back and they went out to spray again. So you're going to be looking at that. But that's one thing you want to keep in mind. You can build a remote station. It doesn't have to be me.
Am I the only one having trouble hearing him?
No, you're not.
I was trying to
I'm
follow
sorry?
the inflections with my eyes.
Yeah, it was cutting out. It was cutting out there a little bit at the end, Tom. You sound a little robotic, but I think you were basically saying that we would have to do additional staffing, and it would be more costly, essentially, to have a whole other unit operating. Jane, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I'd like to go ahead and comment too. Mike, I appreciate your comments about having the fire station downtown. I think at one point I always thought that would be the best place for it too, just thinking about our downtown and being in walking distance and that sort of thing. And the more that I hear about the opportunities for economic development and what can be done through the airport, and the airport is part of our economic development plan for the community, I'm leaning towards that Elks Land and having it up there. I think it would be important to have maybe a meeting where maybe the Economic Development Committee or even folks from Arcaton join us and talk about maybe what they see or is happening that isn't public yet. And I don't know, I don't mean that stuff that they can't talk about, but just that stuff in their visioning and what they're thinking about for economic development for the community, that this is a larger conversation. So I'm appreciative of hearing, and would have thought that downtown would have been a good place for it and that building, but I'm swayed towards other things that I'm hearing around economic development, things that can happen at the airport. The more I learn about how much Jeff already has going on there that I had no clue about before become involved in the municipal government. So I think it's more communication, more discussion. So thank you.
Thank you, Jane. And on that note, obviously everything that a town does has to consider not only cost, but also weighing that with the public benefit. And public benefit is pretty broad. Especially for something like this, the economic impacts of it, the social services impact of it, obviously safety and health impact. If we're looking strictly at cost, Mike, I know you mentioned earlier about potentially re-engineering the plans to better fit a lot. Part of why we wanted to use the plans that we have right now is because it's already paid for and done. If we were to make any changes to that, it would be a significant amount of money, very significant. So I'd be concerned about looking at that, plus adding the cost of another lot that would be limited only to that use. So now you're basically doubling the cost without any other benefit to the town. And plus, obviously the issue of location and not being able to be as accessible as maybe we would like in terms of responding to emergencies given the intersection there. So I just wanted to point that out. The reason the Elks land was identified was potential for future revenue, the larger amounts of space that we'd be able to do economic development on Central Street, tackling issues like housing, and also having the fire station and the benefit to the airport. Anything that I've seen so far, and I think a lot of people on this committee could agree, any variation of that is more costly. And I think that's something to consider, at least on the economic side of it. Just want to point that out. Mike, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, again, it's, I don't know if that's me or not, but again, it's a situation where I don't think cost-wise, I haven't looked at those plans for the fire station that was developed before, but I can almost guarantee they weren't, it wasn't a public safety building. It was a fire station strictly as a fire station. There was no, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think in the design there's any allotment for any type of police presence in that building or in that design. So the added cost is going to be there eventually, one way or the other, if the town should decide. And you want to talk about the future. If the town decides that they want to go ahead and reestablish a police department or police presence in town, there's no place to put them other than the basement of the municipal building again. As far as costs are concerned, the extension of the water and the sewer to that Elks property is going to be a lot of money. Whether you are able to come up with some kind of funding or whatever, it's still going to be a lot of money. And that isn't even taking into consideration the actual purchase of the land. Now, if the solar farm can be moved to the airport land that we already own, so much the better. The idea that there's going to be a lot of revenue generation from that airport, that Elks land, again, that's a stretch because, yeah, it could be marketed, but it doesn't necessarily mean that anybody's going to do anything with it. You can't have, to me, it seems like you've got conflicting, for the last 5 or 6 years, all I've heard about is walkability within the town of Millinocket, accessibility, having things available for people to make the downtown walkable, to make this way, to make this that way. And so now you take probably one of your most vital buildings and you stick it at the end of town. And you take it away from the accessibility of the people who probably are going to need it the most. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. You're kind of, all right, we want to have, so basically walkability means we're going to have biking and walking to get to brew pubs and restaurants, but we don't have the ability to get ahead and be able to get to a public safety building. That doesn't make sense. As a matter of fact, it's counterproductive to what the town really needs. Again, when was the last new construction that was done in the town of Millinocket? It was quite a while ago. What a better shot in the arm for the people and the taxpayers of the town of Millinocket than to have this building in the downtown area, a new construction where they can easily access by multiple ways. It checks off so many more boxes than that Elks land. It really does. And for the cost of obtaining the property compared to buying 117 acres of nothing right now to go ahead and start fresh, I don't think it's very cost effective. And yeah, you may have to do some re-engineering of the building to make it fit. But again, it's money well spent if you're looking to the future of the town of Millinocket rather than, I just think it's got too many positives and not enough negatives to be pushed aside.
Thank you, Mike. You mentioned accessibility.
Mhm.
Fire trucks being able to access a fire is a big part of accessibility, in my view. And putting a fire station right at an intersection is very counterproductive to that.
If you look at building this, it depends on the design. If you have the design where you have garage bays on either end of the building, so that they could go out on Penobscot Avenue, which would allow them to have access to the Pines and a lot of the Lake Road area, plus go the other direction and have access to Central Street. That's the new type of design of fire stations, not the one that we have now where you have a straight in, straight out access. Those type of stations, if you go to communities where newer ones have been built that aren't just a Quonset hut steel frame, you're going to see that on a lot of places, those type of buildings where you have multiple egresses to get in and out of are what is being designed and being built.
Thank you, Mike. And just noting time, I want to make sure enough people get to comment on this. Tom, did you have a response to that? I saw you unmuted yourself.
Yeah, Mike's right. We don't want a fire station that you're gonna have to back into. We want a fire station that you can drive around, drive through. The lot that Mike's talking about, if the town still had the access, which we used to have, to Aroostook Avenue from the back side of that lot, you're talking a whole different thing. I know when Dick and I set that plan that we have now on that lot, there was no back entrance. There was no way that we were going to be able to get around, to get in and out, to drive through. And Mike talks about it being a public safety building. Well, if you look at those plans are just a fire station. If anybody that has any history in this will remember when we tried to build that fire station, the one that we have the plans for, we started adding on to it. We added a police station to it, and we added this to it, and we added that to it, and that's what drove the cost up, and it never did get built. But the way that station is right now, those plans could be renovated to get a police department in there as well. You wouldn't have jail cells, but you could have your offices and your police department in there with very little changes to the plans. Just a thought, and I'm not. I wish that we had been thinking. If I'd have known we were thinking along those lines, we've been working with DOT and with the Central Street corridor, the route, and I'd like to have had them, played that by them, Jane, when we were talking about this stuff, because I think they'd had some, good comments about that lot and about trying to put a fire station in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Peter, then Louis.
Just in reference to some of the comments from Councilor Madore, I wanted to see if Tom had any input he could add to the concern of walkability. Could you speak to the amount of foot traffic you get from community members at this point, given your central downtown location?
I wish that we could take a poll and ask. You don't know how many people in the town of Millinocket that I talk to throughout the week, throughout the year, that have never been into the fire station. I have people come to the fire station that have lived here all their life and never been there. They don't have a reason. We have very, very little foot traffic at the fire station. I have, every once in a while you'll get somebody, but it's very, very seldom that anybody comes to the fire station for anything. Could that change?
But
You could make it I don't know, because most fire stations nowadays are locked down. You don't go to a fire station because you don't get in, because they're all locked down. And that was long before COVID. That was just because of things that we have there. We don't want people in wandering around, so. I don't get a lot of traffic. Never have. In all the years I've been there, we've never had traffic there.
Thank you, Tom. And just to add to Mike Medora's point, though, if this were to host police at any point in time, obviously access to that would be a lot more significant to consider. Just wanted to point that out.
Steve, I would like to comment before you end the meeting.
Thank you. Yep, I have Louis next, then I'll get right to you. Go ahead, Louis.
Yeah, just giving a nod to Jeff and Councilor Danforth's comments. I really think we have to seriously try to do something for fire station that has access to the airport. Thank you.
Thank you, Louis. Matt?
Sorry for the terrible audio quality. I'm on the highway right now. You know, I don't want to play devil's advocate here, but I'm going to anyway. The fire station isn't very welcoming from the outside, unless in the summertime when you have the doors open and you visibly see people. You know, that's one of the reasons why I never personally stopped down. Is it's not very welcoming. I don't know where the door is. You know, there's no signage or anything to indicate any of that. That's, you know, out in the open. Not to mention the parking kind of sucks. But at the same time, the idea of, like, bouncing off what Mr. Malcolm had said, having land around a fire station is extremely important because it opens up the ability to further expand upon it in the future, like you said. If we build it on Central Street in the K&M building, it's a very limited amount of space, and you're talking about taking commercial property away from the downtown area. And if we ever decide, or if new technology comes out and we need bigger space, we're going to have to build a new place anyway. You know, thinking for the future, like has been suggested multiple times, we really need to focus on what we're going to do 20, 30, 40 years down the line. Building it at the Elks property gives us the advantage of thinking, what can we do in 40 years from now? Then things may change. We'll have the property to do so. Just food for thought. But I agree with putting it at the airport. As much as I would love to see it somewhere, you know, accessible for me and my family, I also want to consider the safety and the availability for the future at a lower cost. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Any other comments on Elks property? I was going to suggest that we do a pro and con list of some of these properties that could probably be included. I think what should come out of this committee is a complete package that kind of looks at all of these issues, responds to them, and looks at every one of the properties that we've discussed and talks about the pros and cons of it. Because they're all obviously important things to consider, and being that I'm looking at participants, there's only 10 of us in a town of over 4,000. Obviously, the whole town's not participating in these meetings. It would be helpful to show what we thought through, what the potential increase or decrease of costs of each one of these decisions are, factors like walkability, factors like adding the police component to it, because to Mike's point, and I do take it very strongly, if we are looking 40, 50, 100 years in the future, we could experience many more variations in the service that we get from police. We can continue contracting that whole time. We could have turned into a consolidated force. We can turn to having our own department. And looking at that, we should consider, the location and the building type itself of that as well. So having a pros and cons list is maybe what we should be working at this point. And I can put something together for the next meeting so that we can talk through that, and hopefully that'll frame the conversation a bit better. Louis, did I see your hand go up?
Yeah, I was just thinking on those pros and cons, we have to make sure that the plans we want to use are figured into that, I mean, that alone could eliminate some of the lots.
Yeah, thank you, Louis. Yeah, perhaps, what's the word? Scoring some of these things So how important one thing is over another. So for example, maybe a threshold of cost makes it not viable, or the ability for a truck to be able to drive through the building makes it not viable. You know, factors like that. And that's probably a discussion we should have here on how we want to score each one of those items. Yes, Mike.
I want to make sure though that if you do that, you add in or factor in the cost of engineering for water and sewer for that area out on Central Street. Because if you're just talking apples to apples, that's one thing, but where the existing infrastructure is already there to support that type of facility with the water and sewer, as compared to having to put extension out to that land, and you don't know exactly on that land where you're going to locate yet, or how far, or how much that's going to cost, I would factor that in.
Absolutely. Point well taken. Thank you. Any other thoughts on that? All righty, I'll put together at least a draft of how we might be able to frame this and score this moving forward. And hopefully that can expedite the process a little bit here. And I'll add to that final package, I'll add you know, the runway issue and all those others that have been brought up to it. Yes, Jeff, I see your hand up.
Yeah, obviously this could take a whole meeting just to discuss this one topic.
Yes, it could. Perhaps we should do that.
Exactly.
All right. Well, with that, let's move to the last item on here. If it is the last, did I say Project Canopy update, or is that the old one? Well, Project Canopy update is that I don't have an update for you. So there's that one. Boom. And the last one is the water issue. As I'm sure a lot of you have seen in the paper and elsewhere, there's become a lot of issues of water contamination, whether through farms or runoff in water and things like that. I just wanted to bring to the committee the fact that the last report that Maine Water has done on our drinking water tested water that was before being treated for forever chemicals called PFAS, which there are 2 variations of. I included a copy of that in the last email and everything. Basically, it says that they were not detected prior to being treated. There's one more section, so I just wanted to make that known to the public that PFAS was tested, and that should not be a concern, assuming you know, after being treated there was no exposure to it. But the second component of it is a whole host of other contaminants that I am concerned about. In the, let's see what page that is. Under water quality data, Millinocket Division, it makes it known that there are a host of chemicals that Maine Water has been waived from monitoring or reporting. And it's because it states that there's been an absence of these potential sources of contamination within a half-mile radius of the water source. So this is a 3-year waiver that Maine Water got for synthetic organics, and those are pretty significant contaminants. The chemicals that includes are herbicides, semi-volatile organics, pesticides, and a whole host of other compounds that are pretty significant to human health. Knowing that along the roadways, power lines, even just the logging industry, all experience a significant amount of herbicides and pesticides, I don't really agree with the fact that there has been no application of any of these compounds within a half-mile radius. So I would be interested in knowing how we can have some of this water tested, perhaps at various locations, to ensure that we aren't getting any of these chemicals in. I looked back as far as 2017, and it seems to me, which isn't very far, but they had the waiver then as well. So it's been at least 5 years or so that we're looking at with no testing whatsoever on those compounds. Being how groundwater works, water runoff works, and how close to the water source they do spray, particularly Versant, I would like to know what chemicals might be in our water. So I wanted to discuss that with the committee. Perhaps if we request it from Maine Water, I don't know if according to law they have to do it. I don't know if there'd be a cost to it. I don't know if the University of Maine might be able to do it for us at a discounted or prorated or even for free. But I wanted to bring up that issue and see what the thoughts of the committee are. Yes, Louis.
No, I think it'd be worthwhile exploring with Maine Water and the university to see, what options are there.
Thank you, Louis. Mike?
Back in the probably 1980s, there was an issue with the water in the town before a lot of the upgrades that Maine Water made afterwards. And at that time, requests were given to the water company to go ahead and come up with water tests. And what they found was they ended up going, private citizens ended up going to private firms and having the water tested, and came up as there were contaminants in the water that were identified that had to be removed. So I would say before, you can contact Maine Water and ask them for testing, but I would go ahead and rather see an independent analysis of water from various locations in town done just one time to see what may or may not be in the water, if that is your concern. I do it independently. I wouldn't do it through Maine Water. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. I do share that perspective myself. Jeff?
I will be unable to provide a sample at this time.
Wasn't there just something done within the past few years at the school where they came in and tested the water at the school?
Yes. They tested
I-
they tested the drinking fountains. And
Yeah,
found that 2 of the drinking fountains had to be replaced and refiltered. I think there was more to it than that, but that's what I know, Tom, is they tested the drinking fountains and found out there had to be some upgrades there as far as the amount of contaminant in the water that the students were drinking. But they did that through putting new fountains in with better filtration.
Mike,
Yes.
there was actually a project some of us high school kids did in one of the science classes, and they had this gentleman come in, and he gave us water kits to bring home and test, and we all got our results in the mail, and we had very similar results, and this was about 8-9 years ago.
That's why I think that it needs to be an independent analysis, because it would give you a lot more, you get a lot, I think you get a lot truer report on what is and what isn't in the water. Not saying that Maine Water would hide anything.
I completely agree with you.
Yeah, no, I agree as well. I think that's important to do. Matt, that's a great point that you brought up of students being involved in stuff like this. I think for the youth committee, we should try and explore ways that youth can get involved with some of our own town processes like that, to be a part of how decisions are made and how things are done.
I believe those kits were given for free, and I think you can even request them and they will give them to you for free. I can't remember off the top of my head what the name of the company was.
Yeah, I doubt that those kits would have targeted these specific types of contaminants. I'm sure they went for other things like fluoride levels and things of that nature. But yeah, I can look into what kind of testing would be required anyway for these specific types of things. When it comes to PFAS, although they didn't find any previous to being treated, there are no real federal standards on how to deal with those levels. The state just recently started conducting a bunch of tests themselves on farmland and other sources of water. So we're finding a lot of our food is now actually contaminated with these forever chemicals, which are extremely dangerous to our health. But there are no standards for it currently. And also treatment plants don't have the technology to filter it out either. So that is really something that I think we should all be made aware of, is what exactly are we dealing with in terms of if there is any contamination and what we would have to do about it. I think that's important for public health reasons. So I can look into that myself. Basically what's required of being tested, what the cost might be, what resources the state might have to cover some of those costs. I'll present them here and talk through that and hopefully make a recommendation to the council to do something on that. Any other thoughts on that? All right. Well, happy Valentine's Day to everyone. And thank you for your time today. We will meet again soon.
Take care, everyone.
I know.
Thanks. Bye-bye.